October 8, 1943, 6,000 feet above the Netherlands, Flight Officer Ralph Hoare held tightly to the control stick of his Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. It was his first combat mission, barely 20 minutes old. The farm boy from Salem, Missouri, had never fired his guns in real combat before this moment. Yet, through the oily, smudged windscreen, he watched a Messerschmitt 109 attack an American fighter with deadly accuracy. What happened next broke every rule his commanders had drilled into him. Break formation. Never chase an enemy alone. Protect your leader no matter what. But something inside Ralph Hoare, something shaped in Missouri wheat fields and Chicago boxing gyms, ignored all those rules. He turned hard left, dove away from his flight, and went hunting. The gun camera. Footage watched that evening at Royal Air Force Debden shocked veteran pilots who had flown dozens of missions without ever firing at an enemy. A Messerschmitt filled the frame at point-blank range, taking heavy hits from .50 caliber machine guns. The German fighter rolled, dove, and broke apart. On his first combat mission, the farm boy with zero flying experience before 1941 had done the impossible. He had scored a kill. But that was just the start. Over the next 9 months, Ralph Hoare would destroy 30 German planes using tactics so reckless, so wild, so effective, that his commanders argued every day whether to ground him or promote him. The math of his aerial combat broke every rule. The boy who joined the Royal Canadian Air Force on a whim would become the 20th highest scoring ace in the 8th Air Force. He would also become the second highest scoring pilot killed in action. His story shows a truth the military rarely admits. Sometimes the best warriors win, not despite breaking all the rules, but because they break all the rules. On June 22, 1921, at a farm near Salem, Missouri, Ralph Halbrook was born into a world where flying planes was only a dream for country kids. His father worked in a place where even cars were still rare. The boy, who would one day fly the most advanced fighter planes, grew up without electricity in many farmhouses, without indoor plumbing, and with no idea the sky would one day be his world. When Ralph was 4, his father died. His mother remarried, and he took his stepfather's last name, Hoare. That name would later appear in combat reports, intelligence files, and memorials across England. But in 1925, it was just the name of a Missouri farm boy learning to work the land, fix machines, and survive the Depression. Sports saved him from the crushing poverty that hit Missouri in the 1930s. He won a trophy in the Golden Gloves boxing tournament in the light heavyweight division in 1940. He also played semi-professional football in Chicago leagues. His body skills, his quick reactions, and his ability to take hits and keep going all grew in the boxing rings and on the sports fields instead of classrooms. The anger and toughness that would later scare German pilots were trained against opponents. At Trafton's gym in Chicago, where his family had moved. He even boxed professionally for a while under the name Halbrook, sparring with the famous boxer Billy Conn. By 1940, Ralph Hoare had given up on school. He briefly joined a junior college showing some interest in commercial art, but the strict school rules felt too tight for him. He went back to Missouri and took a regular job at Fort Leonard Wood. His plans, as loose as they were to go to California to try professional prize fighting. Flying planes was never on his mind. The change from a drifting young man to a combat pilot happened entirely by accident. In the fall of 1941, Hoare traveled north to Detroit, Michigan. He had agreed to deliver a new 1942 Hudson car from the factory to someone on the West Coast in exchange for travel costs. While waiting for the car, he took a day trip across the Detroit River to Windsor, Ontario. An immigration officer, thinking the young American had come to join the military, sent him to a Royal Canadian Air Force recruiting office. Hoare had never thought about flying. He had never been inside a plane. He had no technical schooling, no navigation skills, and no idea about aerodynamics or ballistics. But the sudden boldness that defined him took over. On July 19, 1941, just hours after crossing the border, he enlisted in the RCAF as an aviation cadet. The car delivery plan was dropped. California and prize fighting were forgotten. The decision should have ended badly. Aviation training. In 1941, needed exact math technical knowledge, reading instruments, and following rules. Carefully, Ralph Hoare had none of these skills. Yet somehow, he finished basic flight training in Canada. He learned how to control planes. He passed navigation courses even though he had no natural skill for them. He learned gunnery even though he had never shot a plane gun before. By October 1942, Sergeant Pilot Hoare was sent to Britain. The RCF gave him more training instead of sending him straight into combat. Months went by. The war grew worse across Europe and North Africa. The Americans joined after Pearl Harbor. Still, Hoare stayed in training, watching the war from the sidelines, getting more frustrated. In June 1943, a chance came: the United States. Army Air Forces started letting Americans in the RCAF transfer to U.S. units. With his flight hours and training, Hoare could join a combat unit right away. On June 11, 1943, the transfer made him a flight officer, a special rank for non-commissioned pilots. More importantly, it put him on the road to fight in the war. But first came more training. The Army Air Forces required skill in flying the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, a huge fighter plane weighing 5 tons empty, powered by an 18-cylinder radial engine making 2,000 horsepower. The P-47 was not easy for careless pilots. Its weight and power needed respect, careful handling, and real skill. Hoare approached it with his usual disregard for normal rules. September 1943, RAF Station. Debden, Essex, Flight Officer Hoare reported to the 334th 4th Fighter Squadron, 4th Fighter Group, 8th Air Force. He could not have joined a more famous unit if he had designed it himself. The 4th Fighter Group had been formed on September 29, 1942, by transferring 3 RAF Eagle squadrons. These squadrons numbered 71, 121, and 133, and were made up entirely of American volunteers who had crossed into Canada to fight before the United States joined the war. The Eagles brought their own ways. To the Army Air Force's independent, by nature bold to the point of recklessness, and not caring about peacetime military rules, they had built their reputations fighting Spitfires over France, and the English Channel, moving to American command, did not change their rebellious nature. The 4th Fighter Group became known as the most individualistic, most aggressive, and most successful fighter unit in the 8th Air Force. Into this group came Ralph Hoare, bringing his own special kind of chaos. With his long brown hair breaking all grooming rules, his bright blue football jersey with number 78 in orange, and a gold snake ring on his left hand, he looked more like a college athlete than a military pilot. Around the base, he was often seen. With Duke, an Alsatian dog, he adopted from a pilot who had bailed out over France. Witnesses said Hoare sometimes took Duke on local flights, crouching down to make it look like the dog was flying when other pilots passed by. He would leave his parachute behind to make room in the cockpit. His look was just the surface of deeper rebellion. Or treated military rules the same way he treated everything else, with cheerful ignoring. He was once picked up by military police in London for not wearing his rank. During the arrest, they found he had no ID cards. His class, a uniform jacket, was made in zoot suit. Style, a style from jazz culture, not military professionalism. Everything about him said he would fail combat aviation in weeks. Then came October 8, 1943. The 4th Fighter Group scrambled to escort Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress bombers attacking targets in Bremen, Germany. Hoare flew as wingman to Captain James A. Clark, a veteran Eagle Squadron pilot, in a borrowed P-47 C-416413 marked QPG. His duty was simple: stay in formation, cover his leader, watch for enemy aircraft. Do not fight unless absolutely necessary. Do not break formation under any circumstances. Over the Netherlands, German fighters attacked Messerschmitt 109's Dove from above, forcing the American formation to break Hoare's. Thunderbolt flicked and spun down, coming out west of Zala. When he got control again, he found himself alone at low altitude, separated from his flight, lost over enemy land on his first combat. Mission. The textbook answer would have been to climb, find his position using landmarks and sun, and head west toward England at top speed. Hoare ignored the textbook completely. At low level over the Dutch countryside, he saw a Messerschmitt 109 chasing a P-47. Smoke poured from the American plane as the German pilot kept attacking. The P-47 turned right and dove from 1,000 feet. Clearly doomed, Hoare acted on instinct, not training. He closed on the Messerschmitt at full throttle, gaining speed. To attack, the German pilot focused only on his victim and did not see the threat behind him. At 100 yards, Hoare opened fire, 0. 50 caliber machine guns hit the German fighter. Hits and sparks went along the body. Oil sprayed back, covering Hoare's windscreen. The Messerschmitt rolled over and dove straight down. Hoare had to push his control stick forward hard to avoid hitting the enemy plane. By the time he pulled out of the dive, oil completely blocked his forward view. He headed west toward the coast at 300 feet, nearly blind. His adventure was not over. A half-mile offshore, a small German patrol boat opened fire. Hoare, with almost no forward view and low ammo, fired several short bursts before turning for England. He landed at Debden hours later, one of the last planes to return. The ground crew saw something strange. The protective tape armorers put over clean gun muzzles was broken. The new pilot had fired his guns on his first mission, something very rare. When Hoare told his intelligence officer, the story veterans came to watch the gun camera footage with doubt. New pilots did not get kills on their first missions. The numbers were clear. Most pilots flew many missions before even seeing an enemy plane they could fight. The film began to play. There on the screen, filling the frame at close range, was a Messerschmitt taking heavy hits. Sparks ran up the fuselage. The canopy shattered. Pieces flew off the plane. The aircraft rolled upside down and dove out of view. The impossible had happened. The farm boy from Missouri had scored on his first combat mission by breaking every rule he had been taught. Over the next 4 months, Hoare flew regular missions without scoring more victories. On February 6, 1944, he shot down another Messerschmitt 109 over France. Then his personal score started to rise very fast. Between his second victory and the end of May 1944, Hoare would destroy 28 more German planes. His tactics went in a direction that shocked his commanders, but worked very well. March 18, 1944, the 4th Fighter Group escorted bombers attacking Munich. The unit had recently switched from P-47s to North American P-51 Mustangs, smooth long-range fighters that would become the most famous American planes. Of the war, Hoare was assigned number 4 position in White Flight 334th. 44th Squadron, number 4 meant wingman to the wingman, the lowest position in a 4-plane group. His job was simple: stay in formation, do not attack alone. Over Bavaria, Horst saw a Messerschmitt 109 below the group. Without a radio call, without telling his leader, he split from white flight and dove. The German plane never saw him. 0. 50 caliber rounds tore through the fuselage. The fighter crashed in flames. Hoare pulled up, looking for his flight. They were gone far ahead, not realizing they had lost their number 4. While climbing to rejoin, he saw another Messerschmitt 109. Chased it. The German pilot suddenly saw the P-51 behind him and bailed out. Instead of fighting, Hoare was now completely alone, deep in German airspace, with a broken radio that stopped him from talking to friendly forces. The smart choice would have been to fly straight for England. Instead, Hoare went looking for more targets. He saw a German airfield and patrolled the area hunting. He chased a third Messerschmitt 109 into clouds and lost it. Disappointed, but not giving up, he decided to head for Munich, the original target, hoping to find his flight. On the way, he saw 2 more Messerschmitts flying above and ahead. Any tactical manual would have said to stay away. 2 enemy fighters against 1 American, deep in German land, low on fuel. Radio broken. The odds were suicide. Hoare climbed after them at full speed. As he did, his Mustang's propeller pitch control broke. The propeller blades stopped working efficiently. The engine screamed boost, and revolutions shot to dangerous levels. The plane shook violently and started losing speed, while the propeller spun uselessly. For the first time on the mission, Hoare thought about surviving. The Swiss border was not far. Switzerland stayed. Neutrality meant Switzerland held both Allied and German air crews who crossed its borders. Internment meant survival, but it also meant the war was over. Hoare put the Mustang into a shallow glide toward Switzerland. Once over Swiss land, he went through bailout steps. He jettisoned the canopy, getting ready to leave the plane. At that moment, the propeller pitch control suddenly fixed itself. The propeller blades bit the air again. The engine smoothed out, and flying speed returned. Hoare found himself in an open cockpit. P-51, with the Swissy Alps below his plane, was suddenly working again. He quickly checked the fuel. With luck, he might make it to England. He averaged fuel use against distance and decided to try. The canopy-less P-51 flew north and west across German land at top cruise. Speed, wind roared through the open cockpit. Cold at altitude cut through his flight suit. Hours passed. The English Channel appeared. White cliffs showed up. Kent spread below. Hoare landed at Manston, the emergency airfield on the Kent coast, for damaged planes. When ground crew checked fuel, they found 6 gallons left. 6 gallons in a P-51 that used 50 gallons per hour at cruise speed. He had flown home on fumes without a canopy, after destroying 2 enemy planes alone, deep in Germany. The mission made Hoare an ace with 5 confirmed victories. He was still a flight officer, one of the lowest ranks in the 4th Fighter Groups, Air Echelon. His commanders faced a hard problem. His total disregard for formation rules and tactics put other pilots at risk. His choice to fight alone against any enemy broke fighter doctrine. Yet, he kept coming back with kills. Gun camera footage proved each claim. Intelligence officers could not argue with the results. Through spring 1944, Hoare's score kept climbing. By the end of March, he had added a Focke-Wulf 190 to his victories. In April, 5 more enemy planes fell to his guns. On April 22, 1944, he was promoted from flight officer to second lieutenant. The promotion did not change his behavior. Then came the last 10 days of May, 1944. A time of air combat so intense, so successful, it was hard to believe Hoare claimed 14 German planes destroyed, mixing air victories with ground strafing attacks. 14 kills in 10 days. The score was higher than many pilots got over whole tours. On May 23, 1944, Hoare was promoted again, this time to first lieutenant. On May 24th, he shot down 2 Focke-Wulf 190s in air combat. On May 29th, he destroyed 5 Junkers 177s on the ground during a strafing. Run 4 confirmed, and 1 shared with another pilot. The ground victories came from attacks on heavily defended German airfields, where anti-aircraft fire often shot down American fighters. Hoare pressed his attacks at very low-altitude guns firing, pulling up through flak bursts that destroyed other planes. On June 2, 1944, Hoare was named flight commander of a flight in the 334th Squadron. He now had the job of leading other pilots. The most undisciplined pilot in the group was now supposed to keep formation integrity and tactical coordination. He developed a reputation for radio nonsense that matched his reckless flying. While other pilots stayed quiet on the radio or used short tactical calls, Hoare filled the frequency with comments. His most famous radio transmission was during a mission over the Alps. While other pilots focused on navigation and threats, Hoare keyed his microphone and said, "Gee, ain't the Alps." Pretty June 6, 1944. D-Day Allied forces landed on the Normandy beaches. In the biggest amphibious invasion in history, the 4th Fighter Group flew many missions over the invasion area, protecting bombers and strafing German positions. On his second mission that evening, Hoare's Blue Flight from 334 Squadron found a German road convoy in Normandy and started strafing runs. They did not see the Luftwaffe fighters above. A large group of Messerschmitt 109s dove on Blue Flight, while the American pilots focused on ground targets. 3 of the 4 P-51s were shot down. In seconds, only Hoare got away. He turned hard, dove for the ground, and disappeared into the dark night. Again, his squadron lost pilots, while the most undisciplined member survived. 5 days later, on June 11, 1944, small arms fire hit his P-51 over France. The plane could not fly. Hoare made an emergency landing at a temporary Allied airfield in the beachhead. He walked away without injuries. Later that day, he flew another plane back to Debden, bringing souvenirs, a German helmet, and a copy of Mein Kampf. Late June 1944. The 4th Fighter Group got ready for Operation Frantic, the shuttle bombing mission that would take American heavy bombers from England to targets near Berlin and then onto Soviet bases in Ukraine. Colonel Don Blakesley, commanding the 4th Fighter Group, led 68 P-51s from the 4th and 352nd Fighter Groups as bomber escorts. Blakesley at first grounded Hoare for the mission. Hoare refused to take required vaccinations for entering Soviet territory. The O shots were mandatory. Blakesley even denied Hoare access to the officers' club bar. Only when Hoare finally took the shots did Blakesley allow him on the mission. June 21, 1944, 0728 hours. Colonel Blakesley led the shuttle escort from Debden. The formation: climbed to altitude, met with 144 B-17s, and headed for Berlin and eastern Germany. Blakesley briefed his pilots carefully on avoiding fights with German planes. If possible, anyone forced to drop fuel tanks before Berlin would not have enough fuel to reach Ukraine. The message was clear: stay in formation, follow the plan, do not deviate. The mission went smoothly across Germany and Poland. over western Poland, one Mustang and one B-17 were lost in a short fight with Focke-Wulf 190Cs. Hoare predictably became separated during the fight. The formation kept going east and carefully flew over unfamiliar Ukrainian land. Blakesley's navigation was excellent. The P-51 squadrons arrived at Pirion exactly on time. In front of Soviet leaders and Red Air Force officers, Blakesley and his pilots taxied into position and shut down. Looking at the planes, it was clear all but two P-51s had made it. One was lost over Poland. The other, flown by Lieutenant Ralph K. Hoare, was missing. Later, Blakesley learned Hoare had become separated during the short dogfight, but kept going east alone. Navigation had never been his strong skill. He landed unscheduled at a Red Air Force field in Kiev, far off course. Suspicious Soviet officials held him in protective custody for 4 days while they checked his identity through proper channels. On June 26th, the shuttle force took off from Soviet bases, hit targets in Eastern Europe, and then flew to bases in Italy. Finally released by the Soviets, Hoare followed. Several days later, with two other pilots whose Mustangs had mechanical problems. During the flight to Italy, one pilot told Hoare his heading was wrong. Hoare, confident as always in his navigation, despite having no natural skill for it, said he was correct. The two others left on a different course. One reached Italy at the right base. The other landed in Sicily. Hoare, running out of fuel, followed a flight of British planes and landed in Malta, hundreds of miles off course. 5 days later, he rejoined his group in Italy. On July 2, 1944, Blakesley offered his P-51s as extra escorts for 15th Air Force heavy bombers attacking Budapest, Hungary. The mission took off from Fodia, Italy. The 4th Fighter Group climbed to altitude and headed north over Budapest. They met a large group of Messerschmitt 109. A violent fight started. Captain George Stanford of the 335th Squadron led his flight with Hoare as his wingman. At the start, Stanford had mechanical problems. His drop tanks would not release. Then his engine threw a piston rod, and he had to break away and go to lower altitude. With no way to reach Italy, Stanford belly landed in a Hungarian wheat field and was captured. While standing near his wrecked plane, Stanford saw a lone P-51 fly low past him. He recognized it as his wingman's plane, Ralph Hoare, who had apparently followed him down to check on him. What Stanford saw next scared him. A Messerschmitt 109 was right behind Hoare, ready to fire. The German plane shot just before both planes disappeared. When the scattered parts of the 4th Fighter Group returned to Italy that afternoon, 6 Mustangs were missing. Among them was Ralph Hoare. When he did not return the next day, the only option was to list Hoare as missing. In action, weeks later, word came through Red Cross channels. Hoare's body was found in the wreck of his P-51 near Mostar in what was then Yugoslavia, several hundred miles south of Budapest. The exact events remained unknown for decades. The truth came out slowly over 50 years. Stanford's account, which came out in the 1990s, was the first clue in the case. It confirmed that Hungarian pilot Ensign Leo Kresvicki of the Messerschmitt 109 1001 Puma Regiment claimed an American P-51 on July 2, 1944. Kresvicki was killed on July 26, 1944, while attacking 15th Air Force bombers going to Austria. The Hungarian pilot's claim matched Stanford's story, but it did not explain why Hoare's body was found near Mostar, 300 miles from Budapest. The EEEE full story finally came out in 2003, when aviation historian Troy White published his complete biography. Through careful research in German and Yugoslav military records, White found that Hoyer was not shot down by an enemy fighter, but by ground fire over the German-controlled Mustar Sud airfield. White's research suggests Hoyer may have been attacked and may be damaged by Kriski, as Stanford saw whether Hoyer was trying to make an emergency landing at the German airfield or was trying to strafe it. Despite damage is unknown. What is certain from records of the flak unit at Mostar Sud is that a P-51 was shot down at low level by the 4-battery flak regiment 19 Legion Condor and crashed into one of the airfield's anti-aircraft positions. At 12:04 hours on July 2, 1944, the crash killed 2 gun crew members and injured 1 other. The body of the American pilot was later identified as First Lieutenant Ralph K. Hoyer, 334th Fighter Squadron, 4th Fighter Group, USAF. He was flying a borrowed P-51 B-436746, marked QPX. He was 23 years old, having just turned 23 10 days before his death. He had flown 74 combat missions. He had destroyed 30 German planes, 15 in air combat, and 15 by ground strafing. He had earned the Distinguished Flying Cross with 3 oak leaf clusters and the Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters. He had also received the Purple Heart and the European African Middle Eastern Campaign Medal with 3 Bronze Stars. Hoyer is buried at Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery in St. Louis, Missouri, in Section 79 sites 254 to 256. The grave is a mass burial with other unidentified American servicemen whose remains could not be separated. He was the 20th highest-scoring ace in the 8th Air Force. He was the 2nd highest-scoring 8th Air Force pilot killed in action. What numbers cannot show is the psychological effect of pilots like Hoyer on German air crews. By spring 1944, the Luftwaffe was losing experienced pilots at unsustainable rates. American fighter escorts appeared over German skies in huge numbers. German pilots faced impossible odds, knowing American pilots would attack aggressively whenever they could. Then there were pilots like Hoyer, who did not just escort bombers or respond to threats. They hunted. They broke formation to chase single enemy planes deep in German land. They strafed airfields protected by flak guns. To German pilots trained in strict formations and careful tactics, this behavior seemed insane. What the Germans did not understand was that pilots like Hoyer were not following American tactical rules. They were rejecting it completely. The doctrine focused on keeping formation together, helping each other coordinated attacks, and managing risk. Hoyer's way focused on personal aggression, taking chances whenever he saw an opening, accepting extreme risk, and ignoring coordination. The 4th Fighter Group made more aces than any other group. In the 8th Air Force, 81 pilots became aces, with 5 or more confirmed kills. Their total destroyed more than 1,000 German planes. In this top group of fighter pilots, Hoyer stood out as the most individualistic, most aggressive, and most undisciplined member. Colonel Don Blakesley, who led the 4th Fighter Group and flew 490 missions himself without being shot down, had mixed feelings about Hoyer. Blakesley liked aggression and results, but hated sloppiness and rule-breaking. Hoyer gave results. While showing everything Blakesley hated about military chaos, their relationship was difficult. Blakesley grounded Hoyer many times and took away privileges. Yet he kept letting Hoyer fly combat missions because the young pilot kept winning. Major James Goodson, another 4th Fighter Group ace with 15 air and 15 ground victories, wrote a lot about Hoyer in his book Tumult in the Clouds. Goodson described Hoyer with affection mixed with frustration. The part about Debden when Hoyer did not return from the Budapest mission reportedly made readers cry. The difference between Hoare and careful, successful aces is clear. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin, who scored 19. 75 victories in Europe, flew with discipline. He kept formation together, coordinated with wingmen, and managed fuel. His success came from carefully following tactical rules. Mahurin survived the war, returned to fight in Korea, was shot down and captured, survived prison camp, and retired as a Colonel Major George Prey, the 8th Air Force's highest-scoring ace with 26. 83 victories, mixed aggression with tactical skill. He led flight's well-protected bombers while hunting enemy fighters and managed risk while accepting danger. Prey was killed in December 1944 when American anti-aircraft guns accidentally shot down his P-51 during a low-level fight with German planes. Ralph Hoare was the opposite. He ignored formation rules completely. He left flights on purpose to hunt alone. He attacked at any odds without thinking. He pressed attacks even when he should have run. His tactics should have killed him in the first months. Instead, he survived 9 months, scored 30 victories, and became a legend. The question historians ask is, did Hoare succeed because of his tactics, or, in spite of them, maximum aggression, unpredictability, and willingness to take extreme risks created chances that careful pilots missed? When Hoare left formation to chase enemy planes, German pilots did not expect a single American fighter. When he attacked at close range, the enemy panicked instead of fighting well. Another argument says Hoare succeeded through luck and natural skill, even though his tactics put him at huge risk. His awareness of the situation kept him alive when alone and outnumbered. His shooting skill let him kill quickly before enemies could fight back. His flying skill let him escape situations that trapped other pilots. The truth probably combines both. Hoare's natural aggression and skill-made opportunities. His luck let him survive long enough to use them. His tactics gave fast results, but made his death inevitable. He was always going to die in combat. The only question was how many enemy planes he would destroy first. For his squad mates, Hoare's death brought mixed feelings, relief that they did not have to explain his absences to angry commanders mixed with sadness at losing a friend and respect for his achievements. The young pilot who wore football jerseys and snake rings, who flew with his dog, Duke on local flights, who commented on alpine scenery during combat missions, was gone. American war reporters had praised Hoare in the months before he died. Virginia Irwin's long article for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch in June 1944 showed his personality well. She described a young man uncomfortable with being called a hero, but aware of his success. When asked about being celebrated for freeing conquered people, Hoare said he would go red from embarrassment. When asked about his skill as a fighter pilot, he said it was just one of those things. After his death, tributes appeared in Missouri newspapers. The local boy who drifted through Depression-era jobs, who joined the Canadian Air Force on a whim, who flew 74 combat missions while breaking every rule, became a symbol of American fighting spirit. In the years after the war, Hoare's legend grew aviation. Historians studying 4th Fighter Group records found his story again and again. His gun camera footage survived in archives. His after-action reports showed a pilot who attacked enemy planes very often. His personnel file recorded constant rule, breaking alongside great combat results. He became a case study showing the tension between military rules and combat success. Modern fighter pilots studying historical aces always find Hoare. His story is discussed in every fighter squadron ready room. Some pilots see him as an inspiration proof that aggression and personal initiative can beat rules. Others see him as a warning a skilled pilot whose rule-breaking led to early death. Both views are true. The bigger lesson of Hoare's story is about war itself. Military organizations exist to manage large-scale violence by following rules. Success depends on teamwork, helping each other, and following plans. But war also rewards personal initiative, aggression, and the ability to act quickly. When chances appear, Ralph Hoare existed at the extreme edge of a loud individualism. His commanders let him operate because he got results. If he had flown in a unit with less aggressive traditions, he would have been grounded forever. The fourth fighter group gave exactly the right place for Hoare to do well. A unit aggressive enough to value his kills, but disciplined enough to work despite him. The 30 victories he scored came at a cost beyond his own death. Other pilots died covering. For when he was absent, formations got weaker. When he broke away, missions became more dangerous. His commanders spent hours handling the chaos he caused. From a pure numbers view, each German plane destroyed meant one less threat to American bombers. By mid-1944, Germany could not replace losses in planes or trained pilots. Every kill mattered. From a bigger view, if every pilot in the 4th Fighter Group acted like Hoare, the unit would have stopped working. Formation escorts would have fallen. Apart bombers would have gone unprotected. Casualties would have gone up. The success of aggressive pilots depended on most pilots flying disciplined formations. Hoare worked well because he was exceptional. The 4th Fighter Group's way was practical. They allowed Hoare's rule-breaking because he got results while limiting the harm he caused. They grounded him for a short time when his actions put others at risk. They promoted him reluctantly when his wins needed recognition. They never fixed the basic problem between his value and his chaos. They just managed it until he died. Modern military groups face the same problem with exceptional people who cannot or will not follow rules. Special operations forces partly solve this by making units where aggressive individualism is expected, not just allowed. Fighter squadrons do not have that choice. They must keep discipline while using individual skill. On July 2, 1944, a farm boy from Missouri who should never have been a pilot who joined the Air Force on a whim, who flew 74 combat missions while breaking every rule, who destroyed 30 German planes through pure aggression, flew into anti-aircraft fire at a Yugoslav airfield and died. He was 23 years old. He left behind a mother in Colorado, friends at Debden, a dog named Duke, and a reputation that would puzzle military historians for 70 years. The 4th Fighter Group kept flying until the end of the war in May 1945. By the end, they had destroyed over 1,000 German planes in air combat and ground attacks. 81 pilots became aces. The unit became the most successful fighter group in the 8th Air Force. By most measures, within that remarkable group, Ralph Hoare stayed unique. Not the highest-scoring ace, not the most skilled pilot, not the most decorated, simply the most aggressive, most undisciplined, most individualistic fighter pilot in a unit already known for making aggressive, individualistic pilots. His tactics should have killed him in weeks. Instead, he survived 9 months and destroyed 30 German planes by refusing to fly the way he was trained. In the end, that may be the most important lesson of Ralph Hoare's story. Military groups train people to work in organized, coordinated ways. Most of the time this works best, but sometimes individuals appear who succeed by ignoring the system completely. These special people make problems for commanders while getting amazing results. The 4th Fighter Group chose to allow Ralph Hoare until he died. They could not control him. They could not copy him. They could not fully understand him. They could only watch in amazement as a farm boy from Missouri, who wore football jerseys and flew with his dog, destroyed German planes at a rate that broke all rules until the day anti-aircraft fire over Yugoslavia ended his short, violent career. His story shows a truth military groups rarely admit. Sometimes the greatest warriors succeed, not in spite of breaking rules, but because they break every rule. Ralph Kid Hoare was not a good soldier. He was a brilliant fighter in war. That matters more than any rule he broke.